Hejun Kim loved three things in his life: his small house in the quiet suburbs of Seoul, his garden, and his regular schedule. At 32 years old, he had everything arranged just the way he liked it. Every morning, he would wake up at 6, water his plants, go to work at his computer repair shop, come home at 5, tend to his garden again, and then spend his evening reading or watching old movies. But on this warm summer night, something disturbed his perfect routine. The clock on his bedside table showed 3:17 a.m. when a strange blue light woke him up. At first, he thought it might be car headlights or maybe the full moon playing tricks through his window. But the light was different. It moved like water and had a color he had never seen before. Hejun sat up in his bed, rubbing his eyes. The mysterious light was coming from his backyard, right where he grew his precious tomatoes. He had spent 3 years perfecting those plants, and they had won him second place in last year's local gardening competition. The thought of someone messing with his garden made him forget all about being careful. He grabbed his phone and an old baseball bat from his closet, though he had never used it for anything except hanging clothes, and walked downstairs. The wooden steps creaked under his feet, and his heart beat faster with each step. The blue light grew stronger as he reached the back door. Through the kitchen window, he could see his garden. The sight made him freeze. There, between his rows of tomato plants, was his new neighbor, Yoonji Park. She had moved into the house next door just 2 weeks ago. Hejun remembered helping her carry some boxes, and how she had smiled and thanked him with a small bow. She had seemed nice, if a bit strange. She always wore gloves, even in the summer heat, and sometimes he caught her staring at his garden with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Now he knew why. Yoonji was kneeling in the dirt, her hands bare for the first time since he'd met her. They were glowing with that same blue light that had woken him up. But that wasn't even the strangest part. The tomato plants around her were moving, growing before his eyes like in those nature videos that show plants growing over several days, except this was happening in seconds. The vines stretched upward, reaching toward the stars. Flowers bloomed and withered in moments, leaving behind small green tomatoes that swelled and ripened to a deep red in less time than it took Hejun to blink. Other plants started to respond too. His pepper plants began to twist toward Yoonji, and even the grass seemed to lean in her direction, as if drawn by some invisible force. Hejun stood there, his mouth open, the baseball bat forgotten in his loose grip. He had read plenty of science fiction stories and watched all the alien movies he could find, but nothing had prepared him for finding actual proof of alien life in his own backyard, casually making his tomatoes grow like they were in a speed-up video. He must have made some sound, a gasp, maybe, or his foot scraping against the back step, because Yoonji suddenly looked up. Their eyes met through the kitchen window. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then something even more impossible happened. Her eyes, which Hejun had thought were a normal dark brown, began to shine with a silvery light, like moonlight on water. Yoonji slowly stood up. The blue glow from her hands faded, but the plants around her continued to move slightly, swaying even though there was no wind. She raised one hand in a small wave, like this was just another normal neighborly greeting. "Hello, Hejun," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the closed window. "I suppose we should talk." Hejun looked down at the baseball bat in his hand and felt a bit foolish. What had he been planning to do with it anyway? Fight an alien who could control plants with her bare hands. He set it down against the wall and opened the back door. "Yes," he said, surprised at how calm his voice sounded. "I think we should." He stepped out into his garden, which now looked very different from how he had left it that evening. The tomato plants were nearly twice their normal size, heavy with ripe fruit that shouldn't have existed for at least another month. The air smelled different too, richer somehow, like the deepest part of a forest. "Your garden is very special," Yoonji said, looking around at the plants with what seemed like genuine appreciation. "I haven't seen such healthy soil on any world in this sector. You must care for it a lot." Hajun nodded slowly, trying to process the casual way she had just mentioned other worlds. I do, he said. I spend most of my free time here. He paused, then added, though I've never managed to make anything grow quite that fast. A small smile appeared on Yoonji's face. That's one of the benefits of being from a planet where plants evolved to be our partners rather than just our food. She reached out and gently touched a tomato leaf. It curled around her finger like a pet seeking attention. Though I really shouldn't be using my abilities here. It's too risky. But your garden. She looked around again, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. It reminded me so much of home. I couldn't resist. Hajun had about 1,000 questions fighting to be asked first. Where was she from? Why was she here? What did she mean by too risky? But what came out was, would you like some tea? Yoonji's smile grew wider, and for a moment, her eyes flickered back to their human brown. Tea would be wonderful, she said, and while we drink, I can explain why I'm hiding in your small corner of Earth, and why you might be in danger just from having this conversation with me. Hajun looked at his transformed garden, then back at his clearly alien neighbor. His quiet, ordered life had just become much more complicated. But as he led the way back to his kitchen, he realized he wasn't as upset about that as he probably should have been. Sometimes, he thought, the most interesting stories start in the most ordinary places, like finding an alien conducting botanical experiments in your backyard at 3 in the morning. Hajun's kitchen had never felt smaller than it did at 3:45 a.m., sitting across from an alien who was carefully sipping green tea from his second-best cup. Yoonji held the cup with both hands, and he noticed how her fingers still had a faint blue glow, like the last light of sunset reflecting on water. Your tea is very good, she said, breaking the awkward silence. We have similar drinks on Niraya, but they're made from flowers that sing when they bloom. Hajun nearly dropped his own cup. Singing flowers. Yes, the whole planet is like that, full of life that would seem impossible here. Yoonji's eyes turned distant, and for a moment, they flickered between brown and silver. Niraya was, a garden world. Every city is built around massive trees that reach into the clouds. Our buildings grow instead of being built. Even our vehicles are living things that we guide rather than drive. She set down her cup and held out her hand, palm up. A small ball of blue light formed above it, and in the light, Hajun saw what looked like tiny seeds dancing. This is how we do it, she explained. Every Nirayan is born with the ability to talk to plants, to shape them, to help them grow. We call it the touch of life. Like what you were doing to my tomatoes, Hajun said, remembering how his plants had grown so quickly under her touch. Yes, though that was very basic, just encouraging normal growth to happen faster. She closed her hand, and the light disappeared. On Niraya, we use these abilities to create everything we need. Food, shelter, medicine, even art. We were peaceful for thousands of years. Hajun noticed how she kept using the past tense. What changed? Yoonji's face darkened. About 5 Earth years ago, some of our scientists discovered something new. They found that we could use our powers not just to help plants grow, but to take their energy quickly. Very quickly. A whole forest could be turned into pure energy in minutes. She shuddered. It was meant to be used carefully, only in emergencies, but some saw it as a weapon. The harvesters, Hajun guessed, remembering what he had learned about history. Power like that always attracted people who would misuse it. Yes. Yoonji nodded. They started small at first, just a few remote forests. Then entire regions. They said they were making Niraya stronger, that we needed the energy to expand, to protect ourselves from other worlds. But they didn't stop there. She stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the garden. They found other planets, ones with plant life, but no advanced creatures to stop them. They stripped them bare, turned living worlds into dead rocks floating in space. That's when many of us realized we had to stop them. Hajun watched as she pressed her hand against the window glass. Frost formed on the other side, but it wasn't normal frost. It was patterns of tiny leaves and flowers spreading across the glass like a living painting. I was part of a research team, she continued. We were mapping unexplored sectors of space, looking for new types of plants we could learn from. Instead, we found something terrible. The harvesters weren't just attacking empty planets anymore. They had found worlds with primitive but growing life, the kind that might one day become intelligent, and they were planning to harvest those too. She turned back to Hajun, and her eyes were fully silver now, glowing with emotion. We had the coordinates, the proof of what they were planning. My team tried to take it to our world's leaders, but she stopped, and Hajun saw tears that looked like liquid starlight running down her cheeks. I was the only one who made it out alive. And you came to Earth, Hajun said softly. But why here? Why my neighborhood? Yoonji smiled sadly. Earth was perfect. You have enough technology to hide among, but not so much that you monitor every corner of your sky. And Korea, she gestured at his garden. Your people understand the balance between progress and nature. You build huge cities but still keep gardens. You respect the old ways while embracing the new. It reminded me of how Naraya used to be. She sat back down and picked up her tea, which had gone cold. With a gentle touch, steam began rising from it again. I thought I could hide here, keep the coordinates safe until I found others who escaped, who could help me stop the harvesters. But I got careless tonight. Your garden. She looked embarrassed. It was so well tended, so full of life. I just wanted to help it grow, to do something good with my powers for once since I've been running. Hajun looked at his alien neighbor, this person who had lost her whole world and still stopped to help someone's garden grow. He thought about all the times in history when people had to choose between staying safe and doing what was right. What happens now? He asked. Now. Yoonji's expression became worried. Now you should probably pack a bag and go stay with family for a while. The harvesters have devices that can detect when we use our powers. After what I did in your garden tonight, they might. She stopped suddenly, her whole body going still like a deer sensing danger. Hajun was about to ask what was wrong when he felt it too. A deep vibration in the ground, like a subway train passing far below. Except there was no subway line anywhere near his house. They're here, Yoonji whispered, her voice filled with fear and guilt. I'm so sorry, Hajun. I never meant to bring this to your door. The vibration grew stronger, and now Hajun could hear a low humming sound, just at the edge of his hearing. Outside, his garden began to glow with a different kind of light, not the gentle blue of Yoonji's power, but a harsh, hungry red. We need to run, Yoonji said, standing up so quickly her chair fell over. But Hajun didn't move. He was looking at his garden, at the tomato plants that had given him so much joy, at the small piece of earth he had made his own. Something stubborn woke up inside him. Something that said, no, not here, not in my garden. Tell me, he said, his voice steady despite his fear, can earth plants learn to do what your plants do? Can you teach them to fight back? Yoonji stared at him, her silver eyes wide with surprise. It's possible, but, Hajun, these are the harvesters. They destroy whole worlds. But they've never faced a Korean gardener and his alien friend before, Hajun said, managing a small smile. And they've never met my prize-winning tomatoes. The night sky above Hajun's garden changed color. What had been a clear, starlit evening became a deep purple, like a bruise spreading across the heavens. The humming sound grew louder, and now Hajun could see what looked like dark clouds forming overhead, except these clouds moved against the wind and had edges too sharp to be natural. Those aren't clouds, Yoonji said, her hands already glowing with blue light. They're ships using the atmosphere to hide themselves. The harvesters always attack from above. It makes it easier to pull the life force straight up from the ground. Hajun nodded, trying to stay calm even as his heart raced. Then we need to give them a surprise from below. You said you can teach my plants to fight. Yes, but it's dangerous. Yoonjae looked at him with worried silver eyes. Once we start, we can't stop until it's over. And Hojun. She paused. Your plants might never be the same again. Hojun thought about his garden, about all the peaceful hours he had spent tending it. Then he thought about what Yoonji had told him, about whole worlds stripped of life, about her friends who had died trying to stop it. Some things are more important than winning garden competitions, he said firmly. Tell me what to do. Yoonji's face broke into a grateful smile. We have about 5 minutes before they land. First, we need to wake up your plants, make them aware. Here, she took his hand, and Hejum gasped as blue light flowed from her fingers into his. It felt warm, like sunlight on a spring morning. Think about your connection to these plants, she instructed. You've cared for them, helped them grow. Now we're going to help them grow in a new way. Together, they walked through the garden. Wherever their joined hands passed, plants began to stir. Tomato vines uncurled like waking snakes. Rose bushes stretched their thorny branches. Even the grass seemed to stand taller, each blade turning slightly to face the strange clouds above. Now for the hard part, Yoonji said. She pulled a small silver device from her pocket. It looked like a cross between a seed and a crystal. This contains data about Nerean battle plants. We can use it to teach your plants new tricks, but we have to be fast. She pressed the crystal into the soil of Hojun's largest tomato plant. Blue light spread through the ground like water soaking through cloth. All around the garden, plants began to change. The tomato vines grew thicker, developing tough outer layers like bark. Their fruits swelled and took on a metallic sheen, looking more like red grenades than vegetables. The rose's thorns lengthened into sharp spikes, and their petals became hard and glossy, like natural armor. Your plants are learning, Yoonji explained as they worked. Earth plants are different from ours, slower to grow but stronger, more stubborn. They don't want to die any more than we do. Above them, the cloud ships were descending. The air grew thick with red light, and Hejum could feel something pulling at him, trying to drain his energy. Around the garden, his neighbors' plants began to wilt, their life force being drawn upward in streams of crimson mist. But in his garden, the plants stood firm. The blue light of Yoonji's power, mixed with the natural strength of Earth's plants, created a shield that the red light couldn't penetrate. Then the first harvester appeared. He stepped out of the red light like a shadow becoming solid, wearing armor that looked like it had been grown rather than built. His face was similar to a human's, but his eyes were pure black, and patterns like tree bark moved across his skin. Researcher Yoonji, he said in a voice that sounded like rustling leaves. You've led us on quite a chase across the stars. Hand over the coordinates, and we might let this primitive world survive. For now. More harvesters appeared behind him, each carrying weapons that looked like twisted branches made of metal. Hejum counted at least 10 of them. Commander Dahyun, Yoonji replied, her voice cold. Still pretending you're doing this for the good of our people. The harvester commander smiled, and it was like watching tree bark split. Our people need to grow, to expand. These lesser worlds are just fertilizer for our great. He never finished his speech because at that moment, one of Hejum's tomato plants decided it had heard enough. The plant launched one of its metallic fruits directly at the commander's face. The fruit exploded on impact, releasing a cloud of seeds that instantly sprouted into thorny vines, wrapping around the harvester's armor. That was when the real battle began. The harvesters raised their weapons, firing beams of red energy that tried to drain the life from Hejun's garden. But the plants fought back. Roses launched their armored petals, like throwing stars. Grass grew instantly into razor-sharp blades. Tomato vines whipped through the air, their fruits exploding into more and more quick-growing thorns. Hejun and Yoonji moved through the chaos, directing their botanical army. When a harvester tried to flank them, Hejum's prized pepper plants sprayed them with a cloud of super spicy mist that even their armor couldn't filter out. When another tried to use their energy-draining weapons, the garden's trees dropped their leaves all at once, creating a shield of spinning natural armor. "This is impossible," Commander Dahyun shouted as he struggled with the ever-growing mass of vines. "Earth plants are primitive. They shouldn't be able to do this." "You never understood," Yoonji called back, her hands blazing with blue fire as she helped a rose bush reshape itself into a flowering fortress. "Life doesn't have to be advanced to be strong. It just needs a reason to fight." The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The Harvester's superior technology clashed with the raw, desperate power of earth plants enhanced by Nerean science. Hejum's small garden became a battlefield unlike anything either world had seen before. And slowly, incredibly, the garden began to win. The Harvester's armor, designed to resist energy weapons and traditional attacks, had no defense against seeds that could sprout inside its joints. Their energy-draining weapons couldn't work fast enough against plants that could regrow almost instantly, and their tactical training hadn't prepared them for vegetables that fought back. "Retreat," Commander Dahyun finally ordered, his perfect armor now covered in flowering vines and splattered with exploded tomatoes. "Fall back to the ships." The Harvesters pulled back, vanishing into their red light. The strange clouds above began to move away, their edges now ragged where Hejum's trees had managed to strike at them. As the purple faded from the sky and normal starlight returned, Hejum looked at his garden. It was transformed. Tomato plants stood like small trees, their metallic fruits gleaming in the starlight. Roses had formed walls of thorns and armored flowers. Even the grass looked different, stronger somehow, more alive. "I don't think this will win any normal garden competitions anymore," he said, picking up a tomato that now looked more like a beautiful red grenade. Yoonji laughed, though she sounded tired. "Maybe not, but I think you might have just invented a whole new kind of gardening." She looked up at the sky. "They'll be back, you know, with more ships, better weapons." Hejum looked at his battle garden, at the plants that had fought so hard to protect their small piece of earth. "Let them come," he said. "My garden could use a few more fighting lessons." And in the starlight, Earth's first garden of war continued to grow, its plants reaching toward the sky not in fear, but in challenge. The morning after the battle, Hejum stood in his garden, watching the sunrise paint his transformed plants in gold. The neighbors would wake up soon, and he wondered how he would explain why his garden now looked like something from another world, which, he supposed, it partly was. Yoonji sat on his back steps, her hands moving slowly through the air as she helped heal the plants that had been hurt in the fight. The blue light of her power mixed with the morning sunlight, creating beautiful patterns that danced among the leaves. "Look at this," she said suddenly, her voice filled with wonder. She was holding one of the transformed tomatoes, but instead of the metallic weapon it had been last night, it was changing again. The hard shell was softening, becoming more like a normal tomato, but with a subtle shimmer that hadn't been there before. Hejum knelt down beside her to look closer. "Is it going back to normal?" "No," Yoonji said, her silver eyes wide with excitement. "It's becoming something new. Something that's neither earth tomato nor Nerean battle plant." She cut the tomato open carefully. Inside, the seeds glowed with a gentle light that was neither blue nor red, but a perfect purple in between. "These seeds," she whispered, "they've combined the strength of earth plants with Nerean adaptation abilities. Do you understand what this means?" Hejum thought he did, but he wanted to hear her say it. "This could be the answer we've been looking for," Yoonji continued, standing up with new energy. "The Harvester's whole philosophy is based on the idea that we have to destroy other worlds to make our own stronger. But these plants prove there's another way. We can grow together, create new things that are better than either world could make alone." She walked through the garden, touching each transformed plant gently. The roses, which had become living walls of thorns during the battle, were now settling into elegant spiral patterns, their flowers still armored but beautifully so, like stained glass made of living petals. The grass, which had turned into sharp blades to fight the harvesters, now formed a soft but strong carpet that seemed to glow with health. "Your garden," Yoonji said, turning to Hejun with tears in her eyes, "might have just shown us how to save not just Earth or Naraya, but all worlds. Through cooperation, not conquest." As if to prove her point, a butterfly landed on one of the transformed roses. Instead of wilting or attacking, the flower gently curved its armored petals to create a perfect landing platform for the small visitor. Earth life and alien changes working in harmony. Over the next few weeks, Hejun's garden became something more than just a battlefield or a science experiment. It became a symbol of hope. Yoonji used her communication devices, hidden in what Hejun had thought was a normal laptop, to contact other Narayan refugees. They came in small groups, disguised as tourists or students, each bringing their own knowledge and skills. The garden grew, but not by taking over. Hejun and his new alien friends worked with his neighbors, explaining as much as they safely could, sharing the wonderful new plants they were creating. Soon, other gardens in the neighborhood began to show signs of positive change. Vegetables grew stronger but stayed gentle. Flowers became more beautiful while helping clean the air. Trees grew fuller while providing better shade and fruit. Even the local government noticed. They thought Hejun had developed some new organic farming method, and he won awards for innovative, sustainable gardening practices. He kept the awards in his kitchen, next to Yoonji's favorite teacup. But more importantly, the news spread among the stars. Other Narayans heard about the garden where earth plants and their science had created something new and wonderful. The harvesters tried to attack 2 more times, but each time they found the garden better prepared, the plants stronger and more people, both human and Narayan, ready to defend it. 1 year after that first night when Hejun had found Yoonji in his garden, they sat together on his back porch, drinking tea and watching their transformed garden in the moonlight. The plants glowed softly, not with the harsh light of battle, but with the gentle radiance of life well lived. "The harvester ships were spotted near the edge of your solar system yesterday," Yoonji said, but she didn't sound worried anymore. They turned away when they saw the signal. "What signal?" Hejun asked, though he smiled because he already knew. "The one your garden is sending into space all the time now. The one that says this is a world where life grows stronger through sharing, not taking." She looked up at the stars. "More Narayan ships are coming too, but not to fight. They want to learn. Your garden has started something, Hejun, a revolution in how we think about growth and power." Hejun nodded, sipping his tea. His garden had changed so much from the neat, orderly place it had been a year ago. Now it was wild and wonderful, full of life that existed nowhere else in the universe. Earth plants and alien science had made something entirely new, just like he and Yoonji had made a new kind of friendship. "We should expand the vegetable section," he said thoughtfully. "I have some new ideas for the peppers." Yoonji laughed, her eyes shifting between silver and brown in the starlight. "Always the gardener," she said fondly. "Even after helping save 2 worlds." "Especially after saving 2 worlds," Hejun corrected her. "After all, the best way to make sure peace keeps growing is to keep gardening." Yoonji finished with a smile. Above them, the stars twinkled like seeds of light scattered across the universe. And in Hejun's small corner of Earth, a garden that had become a battlefield had transformed again into something even more important, a place where 2 worlds could grow together, proving that the greatest power in the universe wasn't the ability to take life, but the choice to share it. As night fell, the garden's soft glow reached up toward the stars, sending its message of hope across the galaxy. And in gardens all across Earth, and soon on other worlds, new things were beginning to grow.